Good morning, friends. Happy Sabbath. It's been a big week, hasn't it? Queensland won the State of Origin. And probably even more importantly, the Australian women's cricket team has made it to the semi-finals of the World Cup. I don't see too many people agreeing with me on that one. But life is full of competition, isn't it? Life is full of one-upmanship. Life is full of trying to win. Winning in small things, winning in battles. Today, I want to look at a very small part of Exodus. So if you've got your Bibles with you, turn in your Bibles to Exodus 23. Now let's set the scene for this. It's now been 2 months, almost 3 months, since the children of Israel left Egypt. The children of Israel have been free for almost 2 months, almost 3 months, just over 2 months. And they've arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai. God and Moses have been in communication. They've been talking to each other. And God has said to Moses, I have some things to say to my people. I want you to gather them all together at the base of Mount Sinai. I want you to prepare them. I want you to tell them to prepare themselves. And let's get together and have a meeting. I have instructions for them. So in Exodus 20, God has called a team meeting with Moses and Aaron and all the children of Israel. And at this team meeting at the base of Mount Sinai, he says, all right, look, here is what I'm going to call the 10 Commandments. These commandments will help identify us. These commandments will set us apart from all the other people in the region that you're about to enter. These commandments are what we are all about because it is what I, as your God, am all about. And then he goes on to talk about some other details of the law. He gives us laws and instructions of justice and mercy. He gives us rules about the 3 annual festivals. And then he makes a promise. He makes a promise of his presence. See, the people are scared going into the promised land because there are already other people living there. It's a land filled with hostile people. So God promises to send his angel to go before them and lead them safely into the land that he has prepared for them. Remember, just over 2 months ago, these people were slaves. They weren't soldiers. They didn't have a trained military. They barely had any weapons. And now they were going to face up to the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. There were at least 6 hostile nations already occupying the land which God had promised them. God turns to address this. And in verse 22 of Exodus 23, he says, if you carefully obey this angel of the Lord's voice and do all I say, now listen to this, then I will be an enemy to your enemies, and I will be an adversary to your adversaries. Believe it or not, God has enemies. This is not just a simple, I will be on your side, passive. Yeah, I'm on your side, mate, you'll be right. It's more than that, okay? It's fully proactive. It's not just a statement of position, it's a promise, a guarantee of action. Then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. God has enemies. And today we're going to talk about them. Today we're going to talk about God's enemies and take a look at, from this passage, 3 core themes that we must understand, that we need to remember in this fight of life, in the state of origin of life, as we march towards the promised land. The first of these themes comes right at the beginning of verse 22. But if you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. God has got an agenda. He has a plan. God has enemies, but he's not going to force that agenda on us. He's not going to force that plan on us. See, our enemies, from our perspective, are not necessarily God's enemies. Do you agree? For our enemies to be God's enemies, we need to see the world from God's standpoint. We need to see the world from God's point of view. We need to be standing in God's shoes, walking in God's footsteps, to have the same perspective as him. When we have the same perspective, our enemies will align. Let me illustrate it this way. Do you know what the ISS is? The International Space Station. The ISS fascinates me. It's a science laboratory in space that circles the Earth 50-something times every 92 minutes. That's what it is. Every 92 minutes, the International Space Station goes around our Earth. That's moving, isn't it? It has been inhabited by humans continuously since November 2000. Somebody has been living on that space station, not one person continuously, but it has been inhabited by people. They come and they go in their space rockets, and in early days in the space shuttles, when the Americans were still flying their space shuttles. People have been living in this space station since November 2000. And it's a really different place to live. They have problems living there that we can't even fathom. Actually, I've got a little video. We'll share it with them. Jeffrey, there's one there that talks about the bathroom.
Hello, and welcome to my hygiene corner here on the ISS. This is the place where I wash, brush my teeth, or after workouts, take a shower ISS style. The heart of the hygiene corner is the toiletry pouch, Comfort 1M. It's Russian made, and most crew members ask to have one sent up for them. It's really useful to deploy our hygiene items, and hygiene items come up in a Ziploc like this one. This contains supplies that need to last for 6 months. And they don't look much different from what your hygiene items look in your bathroom, probably. You can see a toothbrush here, toothpaste tube, deodorant. And as far as towels are concerned, we cannot wash stuff up here. So we get a supply of towels every week. We get a towel like this one and a smaller washcloth. I usually take my new ones out on Sundays, so it's not quite time yet. I'll put those back. And for today, I will use the ones that I have already deployed for the week. every second day, we can also take out a new, let's say, camping towel. It's one of those light towels. It comes in a foil like this. It's dry, and then we can add water, wet it, and it's really nice to clean your skin. In terms of brushing your teeth, it's actually very similar to what you would do on Earth. As I said, toothbrush and toothpaste look just the same, and you brush your teeth just the same. The only difference, of course, is that we don't have a sink to spit in when we're done all that extra toothpaste. So some astronauts just swallow it. It's quick and easy. I personally don't like to do that, so I actually spit it in a towel. It's not the most elegant thing, but you have to do what you have to do. As far as soap is concerned, it comes up in pouches like this one. You need to add water, and then you get a nice liquid soap pouch, which needs to last for about 2 weeks. And it's a no-rinse type of soap. It doesn't make a lot of foam, and it doesn't really need to be rinsed. And of course, we do not have any running water up here, so we also need to fill up water pouches. We can connect pouches like this one to the water dispenser, which is in the nearby module in the US lab. And I personally like to fill it up with warm water when it's time to wash, but you can also fill it up with ambient temperature water. So I'll go ahead and do this right now, and I'll see you in a minute. Here I am, and I got my water. So first of all, I'd like to show you how water behaves in weightlessness, which is kind of interesting. Of course, it doesn't fall down like it does on Earth, and it kind of tends to stick to your skin because of surface tension. I don't know if you can see it. You see, it doesn't really want to move away from your hand, just because of that surface tension effect. Now, of course, I put a lot of water on my hand just to show you. You wouldn't use all that water to wash, just because it's a little bit difficult to control. So I'm actually gonna dry it off. But if you have some time to take your time and be careful, you can do that, I think. I do it sometimes. I really put some water on my skin like that. Just a little bit. And then I add some soap. Like that. And then you can carefully go ahead and rub it. And it actually really gives you a nice feeling of cleanliness. And then, as I said, I like to keep my actual towels here dry, so you can use them to dry off. Now, of course, you don't always have the time to take it slowly and be so careful. So if you are a little bit more in a rush, let's say it's a work day and you had your workout and then you have to rush off into something else, then you will simply, just squirt the water into your camping towel and add some soap, and that's a lot easier to control because you can just rub your skin like that. And I don't find it as pleasant, but it's certainly a lot quicker and easier to control. Now, all the water that you use eventually ends up in the towels that you use to dry. And we leave those towels close to a ventilation grate, like in this case you can see a ventilation grate right here, so that they can dry off. And all the water then is recuperated. It evaporates in the air, and then in the air conditioning system it condensates again, and it goes into our water recuperation bus, and it actually gets turned into potable water again. So we don't absolutely lose any of the water that we use to wash. Cutting your fingernails is not the easiest thing in weightlessness. Of course, you don't want to lose any pieces of nails around the cabin. So the best thing is actually to do it really close to a return grid of the ventilation system, so that all the pieces of nails that you cut off get immediately attracted, sucked towards the grid, kind of like this. And then when you're done, of course, you want to have a vacuum cleaner handy so that you can clean after yourself. And to wash your hair, we have a special no-rinse shampoo that requires theoretically no rinsing, but at least very little rinsing. So we just squirt water into our hair, we add some shampoo, we massage it just like we would on Earth, and then we kind of dry the excess water and shampoo off with a towel, and off we go.
Do you know what I learned from that? Every day is a bad hair day on the International Space Station, isn't it? You can comb it as much as you like, and eventually when it dries out, it's just going to do whatever it wants to do. What an intriguing place. You know, cutting your fingernails is a problem. You have to do it the right way, otherwise bits of fingernail float throughout the space station. Have you ever seen the space station go over the head? Put your hand up. There's a few of us. There's a few of us. The space station travels in a very predictable path, and you can look on the internet or you can get an app for your phone to see where the space station is at any given time. Now, there's only certain times that you can see it. Obviously, it has to be overhead you at the time, but there's other things that have to be aligned for you to be able to see it. The important thing is it must be dark where you are, all right? You can see it in daylight, but it's very, very difficult. It has to be like the moon. It needs to be dark where you are, but the sun's rays still shining on the space station. Next picture, please, Jeffrey. My remote's not working. There we go. Actually, this is them working outside the space station over New Zealand. Can you see the northern end of the South Island and then the southern tip of the north? So there's the top end. Okay, so that's New Zealand from space, them working on the space station from space. Things have to be just so for you to be able to see the space station. So it has to be dark where you are. The sun's rays have to be shining on the space station so that its solar panels can reflect the light to you. Pastor Mark's children's story, the moon reflecting the sun so that we can see it, exactly the same thing for the space station. That's how we get to see the space station. So if it's in the middle of the night and there's no sun's rays around, we're not going to see the space station. So you're only going to see it in a little window after sunset or just before sunrise. It must pass nearly directly overhead, as its altitude is not that high. Okay, they keep it between 330 and about 450 kilometres above the Earth, which is not high for many of our satellites. The sun, like I said, must have just set or be about to rise where we are, and the ISS must be in sunlight for us to be able to see it. And it presents as a moving light across the sky. One more little video there, Jeffrey, for us to see. Can you see this little white dot? It's barely visible. Turn the house lights down, Jeffrey. Can you see that tiny little white dot there just going behind the tree? No? That's what the space station, International Space Station, looks like from Earth when you catch it. So it's very clearly a moving object across the night sky. Now, the other Saturday night, there was a number of us here at the church grounds to say farewell to Miles and Belinda. And their two girls, they were about to head off in the next day or so, and There was a few of us that hadn't had a chance to say, see you later, guys. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. So we came down and we were sitting around the fire late Sabbath afternoon, and I looked at my phone and I could see that the space station was due to go overhead and that we would be likely to be able to see it twice, 2 different occasions. One was right at sunset, and it would pass from the north through to the southeast over Mount Archer, fairly low on the horizon. And then an hour and a half later, it would be almost overhead. So I saw it just after 5:30, a dim dot of light that passed over the top of Mount Archer from left to right, and then it disappeared behind clouds. Did you see it then, Jeffrey? That first time? No. People were busy, they had more important things to do. But then as we got closer to the time of the second possible sighting, as we got closer to the time of the second passing, I got up and I went out into the playing field out here to get away from the interfering lights from the buildings. And we scanned the sky in the direction that it was expected to come from. And then there it was, like a star rising in the north above the buildings of Emmaus College. Just to the right of the tree on the boundary fence. And Jeff and Milo were there with me, and the 3 of us saw it fairly quickly as soon as it came into view, didn't we, Jeffrey? And we were talking excitedly about it. And some of the others that were there heard us, and they came. What are you looking at? What? Oh, we can't see anything. There's the International Space Station. We can't see anything. So what do you do in a situation like that? Come and stand here. You have to be standing in the right spot. If you're standing in the wrong spot, it might be hidden behind the tree or the shed. But if you come and stand here and look at it from where I am standing, you will see it. You have to be in the right spot to see the International Space Station. If you stand in the wrong spot, your perspective will be wrong and you will have no hope of seeing it. You have to come and put your feet where my feet are to see the space station. And the moment they looked from the right spot, yes, there it is, Daphne, I remember you saying, yep, I've got it. We cannot see what God is seeing unless we stand where God is standing, unless we put our feet in his footsteps. We don't have God's perspective from our own vantage point. We need to be standing where he is standing to see things from his point of view. That is what the angel of the Lord is saying. He is saying, if you carefully obey my voice and do all that I say, if you put yourself in my shoes, if you see the world from my perspective, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. You see, there's a condition here. We have to come to Jesus. The condition is plain. If you want God on your side, then you have to put yourself next to him. Simple, isn't it? When you put it that way. He has your best interests at heart already, no question. We're not twisting God's arm to help us. But are you seeing the world from his perspective? When you stand next to God and you look at the world, you are looking at the world in the same line of sight as God. Then when you see an enemy from that perspective, you are seeing God's enemies. The Bible's chock full with references of coming to Jesus' feet, to looking at the world through Jesus' eyes. Matthew 11, 28 to 29, come to me. Don't stay where you are. Come to me, all of you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Come right over here next to me and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Or John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You're not going to get there walking over there, but come here and follow in my footsteps, for I am the way. Or then there's the passage over in 2 Corinthians 3:16. But when one turns to the Lord, when one walks in God's footsteps, the veil is removed. What does that mean? When you take the veil away from in front of your eyes, what can you do? You can see when you follow God, when you walk in his footsteps. When one turns to the Lord, you see things from his perspective. You see things from God's point of view. How many of you here want to say, Jesus, come into my heart. I want to walk in your footsteps. I want to see things from your perspective. I want to look at this world through your eyes as much as I can. That, my friends, is step one. That's the first principle from this passage. When we do this, though, who or what are these enemies that we're going to see? Quite simply put, as it was for the children of Israel, the enemies of God is anything or anyone that keeps his people, that's you and me, from reaching the promised land. Yeah? Anything that pulls us away from God's plans for us is a barrier in your relationship with God and is therefore God's enemy. So, broadly speaking, you could say that it's anything contrary to the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. So we're looking at the opposites. What are the opposites of the fruits of the Spirit? Hate, sadness, unrest, irritability, rudeness, selfishness, faithlessness, harshness, impulsiveness. Or maybe they're trials. Maybe they are things that you've come upon knowingly or suddenly in your life that are trying your faith. Maybe it's a job situation. Maybe the loss of a job. Maybe it's a sickness or a loss in your family. I don't know what it is, but we experience trials in our lives that challenge our faith. Those are God's enemies. There are other things too. Maybe it's forgiveness that you might withhold. Maybe a relationship within your family that you are neglecting. Maybe it's a TV show or a computer or video game that runs completely contrary to the values of God. Maybe it's an app on your phone that's monopolising your time. Maybe it's dishonesty in the workplace or in school. Maybe it's pornography or the irresponsible use of money. Temper, you name it, the list will go on and on and on if we were to compile it all together. And frankly, it's a pretty big list for me. The list of my enemies is significant. We soon realise that we are surrounded by the enemy. Reality check, my friends, my Christians. When we place ourselves in the shoes of God, we realise that enemies surround us and we cry out like David did in Psalms 3 verses 1 and 2, "O Lord, how many are my foes? How many are rising up against me? Many are saying of my soul, there is no deliverance from God for him. My enemies are saying, you can't be saved. This is Christian reality. All too often we put ourselves in the shoes of God. We think, this is impossible. The enemies have me surrounded. What can I do? Nothing. But when we begin to think this, we're missing the whole point of Exodus 23:22. For it says, remember, come to me, look at the world from my point of view, and I will be an enemy to your enemies. I will be an adversary to your adversaries. What a promise. See, when we plant our flag in God's camp, when we stand with him, we give him full permission to fight our enemies because our enemies have become his own. Our enemies have become God's own enemies. All those enemies that I just mentioned or that you thought about in your life, all those enemies, they are God's enemies too. God is on our side. Point one was, see the world through God's eyes. See our life from his point of view. Put your feet in his footsteps. Point two is this. Then, once you do that, when you do point one, then God is on our sides. When did God ever say to his followers, you're on your own? Never. Never. God never said to his followers, you are on your own. In fact, he says the opposite very regularly. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Does that sound like you're fighting by yourself? I'll keep you up with my righteous right hand. What about John 16:33? In me you may have peace. In this world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Where are our enemies? In the world. Who has overcome the world? It's simple stuff, this, isn't it? But beautiful. Then Jesus said to his disciples when he leaves, I will send a helper. I will send the Holy Spirit. And he says that to you and me today. Psalms 46:1. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. Not this help that's slow in coming, but a present help, always ready, right here with me, right now when I'm in trouble. Always ready. See, David knew this. He was honest with God. Which is why, back in Psalms 3, after saying, O Lord, how many are my foes? How many are rising up against me and saying against my soul that there is no salvation for him in God? He then says this in the next two verses. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You are my glory, the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord and he answered me. When we see the world from God's point of view, when we line up with him, when we say, Jesus, come into my heart, I want to be more like you, God says, all right, we've now got the same enemies. Let me fight them for you. God is on our side. Now for the last point. Do you know who Christian Pulisic is? I'd be surprised if you do. He's a young 18-year-old fella. Plays on the US Men's Soccer World Cup qualifying team. The Soccer World Cup is the world's largest sporting event. And the US doesn't have a particularly good history in the Soccer World Cup. June 8, just gone, just over a month ago, the US were playing against Trinidad and Tobago. They needed a win to move to the next round of the World Cup qualifiers. They had lost some games that statistically they shouldn't have. And they were now behind. If they lost this game, or even if they drew this game, they were out of the qualifiers. They actually needed to score 2 goals to get the numbers that they needed. Half time, the score was 0-0. And Bruce Area, the head coach of the team, spoke to the fellas. His words were very simple. Just focus on the first goal, and the second will follow. Focus on the first goal, and the second will follow. They came back out on the field and they focused on the first goal and they scored it. It was this young Christian that scored it, this 18-year-old kid. And within a few minutes he goes on and he scores the second goal as well, with his coach's words ringing in his ears. Just focus on the first goal and the second goal will follow. Exodus 23:29. God says in this dialogue with them about the enemies, I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year. I'm going to be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries, but I'm not going to drive them all out at once, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. 2 observations here. God says, you are my people. He says to you and me, you are my child. Before enemies fall, it does not matter what enemies you have in your life. If you have said yes to Jesus, you are in God's family. That doesn't mean that your enemies will be left standing forever, though. What it does mean is the existence of enemies does not dictate your salvation. Let me say that again. The existence of temptations, the existence of struggles in your life, no matter how you feel about yourself spiritually, if you have given your heart to Jesus, your life, if you have given your heart to Jesus, the existence of enemies in your life does not have any bearing on your salvation. We are saved through Jesus alone. But then God says, I'm going to take out your enemies and I'm going to take them out one by one. So my friends, there's the plan on how to do it. One at a time. Focus on the first goal and the second will follow. Why? Because if I do it too fast, you won't be able to handle it. I'm way too strong for you to cope with it. So we'll do it at a pace that works for you. That's what God's saying to us. What does this say to me? It says I need to fight the battles with my God. Put my sight on the first goal that God puts before me. He's given us the Holy Spirit. He's given me a conscience. I do not need to focus on fighting every single enemy at once. We would quickly be overwhelmed. The wild animals will overcome the land. I need to focus only on the first goal. Focus on them one at a time. So where's he fighting for you right now? Because he's fighting somewhere. I know he's fighting for me. Ask yourself, my friends, this question today. What enemy are God and I taking on right now? Where am I and he, where are we fighting right now? If we do this, we know it's all going to be okay. Psalm 27:14. There it is. Wait for the Lord, be strong, follow his lead, and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. Jesus said in a prayer to his Father for his followers, I'm not asking that you would take them out of the world, but that you would help them through it, that you would deliver them from the evil one enemy, one battle at a time. And when we do this, when we consistently say, God, I'm going to fight with you, eventually we will take over the land. Eventually we will find ourselves with our closest ally, Jesus Christ, in heaven with all the enemies gone. All those enemies we talked about, those trials, those temptations, those struggles, those losses, all those enemies, they're going to be gone. Do you look forward to that day? I know I do. I need it. I need that day. So, 3 questions based on the 3 points from today. Have you said yes to Jesus? Are you walking in his footsteps? Are you placing your feet where he placed his feet? Do you see things from his point of view? Are you replicating his footsteps? Whose side is God on? Have you asked God, what enemies are we tackling today? In your life, what's God attacking? What enemies are you and God focusing on taking down? Focus on the first goal and the next will come. And then the next will come. And the next one and the next one. Christian family, follow Jesus because he who began a good work in us will be faithful to complete it. Let's sing now, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, hymn 506.